Okay, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order at 7:04. Welcome to the West Covina City Council Chambers for the October 23rd meeting of the Planning Commission. First up tonight would be the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Commissioner Holtz, and please remain standing for a moment of silent prayer.
Would you please stand, place your hand over your heart, and repeat after me. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. May we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Commissioner Holtz.
Here.
Commissioner Woods.
Here.
Commissioner Menifee.
Here.
Chairman Stewart.
Here. We'll move on to the approval of the minutes of the meeting of October 9th. Any changes or corrections? Hearing none, they're approved as read. Next thing up is the oral communications. This is a time when any member of the public may speak to the Commission on any matter within the scope of duties assigned to the Commission. Other matters included on the agenda may be addressed when that item is under consideration. For all oral communications, the chairperson may impose reasonable limitations on public comments to assure an orderly and timely meeting. The Ralph M. Brown Act limits the Planning Commission and staff's ability to respond to public comments at this meeting. Thus, your comments may be agendized for a future meeting or referred to staff. The Commission may ask questions for clarification if desired at this time. By policy of the Commission, oral communications at this time on the agenda is limited to a total of 15 minutes. Persons who are not afforded the opportunity to speak at this time may do so under the item E later on the agenda. I do not have any cards. Anybody wishing to speak other than things on the agenda? All right, hearing none, we'll go ahead and move on to the consent calendar. Can we have a staff report, please?
On the consent calendar tonight, we do have the forthcoming for the next month's meetings. We do have items for the November 13th meeting right now. It's too early to tell if we're going to be on the 27th, but there will be items on the 13th.
All right, fine. We have a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Commissioner Holtz approved.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Menifee. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 4-0. We'll move on to public hearings. Number 3 up is General Plan Amendment number 02-08-02, Code Amendment number 12-01, Zone Change number 12-02, Mitigated Negative Declaration of Environmental Impact. Applicant is the City of West Covina, and the location is citywide. The request is for the approval of a housing element update to the general plan. Policies within the housing element also require revisions to the land use element of the general plan, changes to the general plan land use designation map, amendments to the West Covina Municipal Code to create standards for emergency shelters and homeless, efficiency residential units, and a mixed-use overlay zone, and a zone change to apply the mixed-use overlay zone to the central business district of the city. May we have a staff report, please?
Yes, it's going to be a little bit different tonight than we normally do. It's a fairly complex matter that we have before you tonight, so there's going to be basically 3 different presentations by 3 different members of staff here. So we're looking at the update of the housing element of the general plan. The general plan has 7 required elements, the housing element being the one that's required to be periodically updated. The housing element update includes new goals and policies that necessitate additional entitlements that are also scheduled for review tonight. The applications will be reviewed tonight, and Dave just went over those, but the General Plan Amendment number 0802, which includes the draft housing element update, draft revisions to the land use element of the general plan, and revisions to the general plan map. Also, we have Code Amendment 12-01, which includes amendments to the Municipal Code for emergency shelters for homeless, efficiency units, and a mixed-use overlay zone. Lastly, we have a zone change, number 1202, which would add the mixed-use overlay zone to the central business district area. In terms of noticing, we did do noticing for this as required. It's published in the paper. Any kind of general plan amendment and zone change code amendments required to be published in the paper as well. We chose to do courtesy mailings for all those individuals who are part of the zone change. So we did, that are property owners as part of the zone change. So we did do mailings. I don't recall the exact number, but it's probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 to 50 notices. And we did get some calls on that. Fabiola spoke with several people on that. So the presentation is going to be split into 3 presentations. First, the housing consultant, Alexa Washburn. She will be providing a report on the housing element update and process. Next, I will be providing a report on the revisions to the land use element, revisions to the general plan map, and changes to the zoning map. And lastly, Fabiola, Senior Planner Fabiola Wong will be providing a report on the amendments to the municipal code. What we'd like to do is sort of treat them like different hearing items to allow for greater discussion and more ease of discussion. So following each presentation, we're going to pause to allow questions from the Planning Commission, and also, I guess, we will allow public input at those times as well. Just by way of introduction, we also have John Lamb from the City Attorney's Office here. I know that all the Planning Commission's commissioners met him. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Alexa Washburn.
Thank you, Jeff. Good evening, Honorable Chair and members of the Commission. My name is Alexa Washburn, and I've been working closely with Jeff and Fabiola and the rest of City staff since 2008 on updating the City's housing element. If you recall, the housing element was first introduced to the Planning Commission at a workshop in December of 2008. And since that time, we've been in negotiations with HCD and have revised the element to make it compliant with state law and bring it into certification with the department. The HCD has issued a pre-certification letter, which the city has, basically that states that the draft housing element is in compliance with state law, that we need to now follow through with adoption and the rezonings and the commitments to the programs that are within. So upon adoption of the housing element, we will send the draft up to HCD for a final 90-day certification period. So tonight, I'd like to just give a brief overview of the housing element process, describe West Covina's Regional Housing Need Assessment, or RHNA allocation, the strategies that we utilize to meet the city's RHNA, and then also highlight a few of the key housing programs that are contained in the housing plan of the document. So what does a housing element do? As Jeff said, the general plan, and we know that the general plan is the city's blueprint for guiding physical development and setting city's policies. And the housing element is one of 7 required elements of the general plan. However, it is the only element that requires review and certification by a state agency. And that state agency is the Department of Housing and Community Development, or HCD. So the housing element sets policies and goals related to housing. It also identifies housing needs in the city for all income groups. And we break down the income into 5 groups, that being extremely low income, very low income, low, above moderate, and even moderate. The housing element identifies sites and units of housing in terms of creating opportunities, not actually constructing or building units. The state recognizes that it's not the city's role to build housing units, but rather to create opportunities in your land use plan and through your zoning to facilitate the development of housing. Certain segments of the population also have more difficulty finding decent, affordable housing. And so we also need to identify the housing needs for those special need groups, such as the elderly, disabled persons, developmentally disabled, large household, and single-parent households. And lastly, the housing element does define initiatives and programs that the city is going to pursue to achieve those housing goals that have been set. So what does a housing element not do? Again, it does not require the city to build or construct housing units. The state recognizes that that's not the role of the city, but rather we are required to create opportunities through our land use plan and our zoning to facilitate the development of housing through the policies. Now, there are consequences of not having a certified housing element, and I would like to go over some of those with you tonight. Again, this is the importance of having an element that is certified by HCD. If your housing element is not certified, you could potentially lose current funding or future funding. There's many grants or pots of funding that's tied to having a certified housing element and makes you eligible for funding sources. It also leaves the city susceptible to lawsuits. If your housing element is not certified or in compliance, then your entire general plan is out of compliance, therefore leaving the city susceptible to lawsuits. Another consequence is having the allocated RENA units carry over into the next planning period. And that's what happened with your current housing element, and I'll get into that a little bit later. And then another consequence came on with Senate Bill 375. And this is where typically our housing element cycle was on a 4-year cycle. With SB 375, we've gone to an 8-year cycle. If we do not meet the deadline and get your housing element certified, you revert back to a 4-year cycle. So again, it's an incentive to get a certified housing element because then we don't have to do it again for another 8 years. So the regional housing need, or RENA assessment, starts up at the state with the HCD. HCD distributes the state's housing need to all the regional councils of governments. The Regional Council of Government for Southern California is SCAG, or the Southern California Association of Governments. So therefore, the state and SCAG has determined that the RENA for the city of West Covina is 2,462 units. The RENA is broken down into 4 income groups, as shown in this table here. So they've assigned 631 units to the very low income group, 388 units to the low income group, 417 units to the moderate income group, and 1,026 units to the above moderate income group. Whoops. There we go. So I want to talk a little bit about the history with the city's housing element. The housing element was adopted in 2000. However, it was never certified by HCD. So with the passage of Assembly Bill 1233, the city now has to plan for the current planning period as well as the previous planning period. So those units carried over. The previous planning period was from 2000 to 2005 and included interim years 1998 and 1999. And the current planning period is 2008 to 2014 and includes interim year 2006 to 2007. So therefore, you'll see in the draft housing element that's before you tonight is that we're looking at a period of basically from 1998, 1998 through 2014. There's 2 planning periods that we're dealing with. So going back to the earlier RENA allocation from 2000 to 2005, the city was assigned a total units of 1,096 units. The current planning period, the city was assigned a total of 2,462 units, broken down by the income categories shown here. Therefore, leaving a combined RENA of 3,724 units. That's the total fair share allocation for West Covina for 2 planning periods. So we utilize 3 strategies to accommodate this combined RENA. It's important to note that to accommodate the very low and low income units, the state has identified what's called a default density. So for the city of West Covina, that default density is a minimum of 30 dwelling units per acre. And that's a density that the state feels that you can accommodate lower income households on. And this will come into play when we get into the sites. But the first strategy that we applied is that the state allows us to go back and credit any units that have been constructed or built and approved since January 2006. A second strategy was to accommodate units on vacant, residentially zoned land. And then the third strategy that we utilized was to accommodate the remaining units, which was the low and very low, on land that will be rezoned. So after we applied the first strategy, which was crediting units, that got us down to a RENA of 1,536. Now, utilizing the third strategy, we identified 8 sites that need to be rezoned. And I'm just going to briefly go over those sites. The first site is Garvey Avenue and Interstate 10. The second site is Cameron Avenue and Orange Avenue. The third site is Toluca Avenue and Cameron Avenue. And the fourth site is Sunset Avenue and West Covina Parkway. Sites 5 through 8 is Sunset Avenue and West Covina Parkway, West Covina Parkway and Vincent Avenue. The 7th site is Interstate 10 and Glendora Avenue, and the 8th site is Glendora Avenue and Garvey. So to accommodate these remaining RENA on these 8 sites, what we did is applied a mixed-use overlay to the city's central business district, or the CBD. The mixed-use zone will require and encourage the development of high-density residential uses, but allows for a mixture of residential and non-residential uses on approximately 70 acres. The application of the overlay zone, again, will require residential development at a minimum density of 30 dwelling units per acre and a maximum of 75 dwelling units per acre. So while the mixed-use overlay will be applied to the entire central business district, which totals 250 acres, we've identified these specific 8 sites that we feel are primed for redevelopment and can be used as more catalytic opportunity sites to accommodate that very low and low remaining RENA. So again, this is just an overview of the 8 sites, the acreage. The average density, again, it's a minimum of 30 with a maximum of 75, so we applied an average of 45 dwelling units per acre. You'll see the potential unit capacity and how we are able to accommodate the city's remaining RENA. So the last part of my presentation, I'd just like to outline some of the key housing programs that are in the housing plan section, that being the emergency housing. The state law, it's through SB 2, Senate Bill 2. The state law requires jurisdictions to allow for housing that meets the extremely low income residents. So to do this, the city is required to amend the zoning code to allow emergency shelters by right, and we've chosen to do that in the light manufacturing zone, and also to accommodate efficiency units in the multifamily 45 zone. Again, this is a new state legislation, that's Senate Bill 2, that came into effect during this planning period. So you'll see we included a housing program to accommodate that. Another key housing program is to provide development incentives. We want to facilitate and encourage the development of housing for all income levels. So the city offers multiple programs in order to do this. This is on a case-by-case basis, but we can offer fast-track and priority application processing, which allows developers to go through the approval and permitting process quicker, therefore keeping costs down and units affordable. We all know that time is money. The second is flexible development standards. Again, on a case-by-case basis, as development applications come in, we want to encourage innovative design, efficient use of land, perhaps consolidating parcels, and permit developments to be judged, again, on individual merits. So we might provide some flexibility in terms of parking standards or setbacks and such. A third incentive that could be used is what we call alternative housing models. And this is to encourage the provision of more innovative housing types that are more suitable to the community. And it could include supportive housing, assisted living for seniors, and the disabled. And finally, a density bonus ordinance. In accordance with state law, the city does offer a density bonus. This could allow between 25% and 160% of a bonus in density for developers proposing housing for low and moderate income as well as seniors. Another key housing program is the Housing Improvement and Preservation Program. And this is really to assist existing homeowners, again, preserving those single family, maintaining that low density lifestyle is to assist existing homeowners with funds to rehabilitate or improve their homes. And the city currently offers 3 programs. Again, these are only good as funding becomes available, but right now we have the Home Improvement Loan Program, the Housing Preservation Program, and the Energy Efficient Design Program. So those are just 3 key housing programs I wanted to highlight that are in your housing plan. I want to end the presentation by I had talked about the consequences of having an uncertified housing element, but also the benefits of having a certified housing element. This will allow us to streamline the next update. Although we're just finishing up your current one, the next update has already started, and the 2014 to 2021 housing element is actually due in less than a year. By certifying and adopting the current housing element, this will streamline us for the next update, as we will be able to utilize the same sites and utilize much of the same programs that are in your current one that you're reviewing right now. It will also allow us timely access to state infrastructure bonds for capital improvement projects. Again, that tied to funding pots and grant resources will have access to CDBG and home funds. It also allows you to direct growth in the community. You see through the sites that we've chosen, we're directing the growth into the central business district. It's close to transit, transportation, and services, thereby preserving the lower density single-family neighborhoods in the outlying parts of the city. It also helps us achieve a job housing balance and reduce traffic impacts, and then lastly, retain that local employment base. So that ends my presentation on the housing element update. I know it's a lot of information to take in at once, but I'd be more than happy to answer any questions at this time.
Commissioner Olson.
Yes, Ms. Washburn, you said there was 4 categories. Was it low, moderate, medium, and high, I think, or something like that? Is that correct?
Yes.
Can you give us the dollar figures on those, where the borderlines are?
Sure. It's broken down into 4 income categories, and we base that on the area median income for this area. Now remember, for the current housing element, we're starting with the planning period of 2008 to 2014. So we're basing these numbers on the 2008 area median income, which was $65,100. This is for a family of 4, so keep that in mind.
I'm sorry, which category would that fall into?
So how we calculate that, for example, for the very low, in order for someone to qualify in that income category, it would be 50% below the $65,100. So an income of approximately $32,000 a year or less. Again, that's for a family of 4. And then for the low, it would be 51 to 80% of the $65,100, and so on.
You don't have those other figures, Andy?
That's in the housing element, isn't it?
It is in the housing
If you go to
element.
page 62 of the housing element, I know that may be a little difficult, but on page 62, there's a table 4-24 that provides some of that breakdown, as Alexa was talking about, based on the size of the family, and then down to 1 person.
Okay. Second part of that question, there's 2 periods in there. The current one, 2008, I think 2014, and I don't know what, the other one was up to 2005 or whatever it is. Did that change? You're combining the 2 groups together. So did that dollar figure change when you mesh them together, or how does that work?
No, the dollar figure would remain the same. Again, this housing element update covers the period of 2008 to 2014,
Right.
the planning period overall. We were carrying over units from the previous planning period because the previous housing element was never certified. So the units carry over, but that income level we accommodate during this current planning period, which we're using the base year of 2008.
So that would be retroactive to the previous period then? Because I'm thinking that the level of income changed over those period of years. And I'm just wondering, when you put the 2 together and you're saying you're bringing the previous group into the 2008, 2014, how did that change for the people that were in the previous group?
Right, it doesn't. That's one of the penalties, I guess, of not having your housing element certified previously. It's just the units roll over, but we're utilizing the base year of the income for 2008.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? I do have one for you. If you happen to have more, say, low income in that time frame built than you are required, do they count towards any other one, or do they wait to the next group?
Yeah, unfortunately, we're only able to credit up to the number that was assigned to you.
Couldn't be assigned in the next 7 years after that? They wouldn't do that, right?
No, we can't, unfortunately. Yeah, once you've met and accommodated the RENA that's been assigned to that particular income category, you can't transfer it or apply it elsewhere. It just zeroes out.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Any other commissioning questions?
I'd like to
Commissioner
make
Menifee.
a comment that I'm pleased to hear that we're planning for the future, because we've spent so much time in this material talking about the past. And I understand much more clearly now than I did before why we're having to deal with the past. But I'm also really pleased to hear you say that we're already starting the work on the next real planning issue for us. A question I have has to do with something that you may or may not have jurisdiction over in your troika here that you're dealing with us. The chart on page 64, table 425, talks about existing affordable developments. Now, other than, I understand this is a plan, this is what we'd like to have happen. We don't make it happen. Developers make it happen. However, we do things to help with that development process. The nature of what's shown on that particular table, a lot of it has to do with something called redevelopment. And we all know what's happening with redevelopment in the city of West Covina and all other cities. And so it makes me wonder if we need to address within this, or is this something we need to address in the next segment, and that is, how on earth do we talk about affordability when we don't have the means with which to afford?
Right, and that's an excellent question. You are correct. Dealing with the current housing element, because again, the base year is 2008, at that time, we had redevelopment. We were fortunate at that time to have really one of the #1 tools, as you said, to create affordable housing. So that's why you will see the reference to the redevelopment agency and redevelopment in this document, again, because the base year is 2008. But you're correct. In our update that we're going to start on, that's due October 15th of 2013, the state recognizes that we've lost one of our tools in the toolbox. And so really that's where we have to look at being creative and looking at other sources. The state does recognize too, and that's why it's not the city's responsibility to actually build or construct the units. So we're looking at other ways to incentivize through permit streamlining, flexible development standards, whatever else we can do that's not monetarily an incentive, I guess, to say. Yeah.
One other note on that. While, yes, redevelopment, as it existed, it no longer is in place. There are housing funds that are still flowing to cities. And it's a little bit early to know how exactly that's all going to work out, but there will be housing funds that the city still has. Maybe not to the level that we had before, but we'll still have some funds to do some things.
Thank you.
Any other commission questions of staff? All right, seeing none, we are going to allow public testimony as we go. Anyone wishing to speak on this first part of it, first segment?
Yeah, so this first segment's on the housing element update itself. That would be what
Right.
it's become.
All right.
Eileen.
Irene, please come up. You have to come forward, please. State your name, please. We're on TV tonight.
All right. I am concerned about the rezoning. If it's going to be mixed use, does that mean there will have to be housing at each one of these 8 points?
No.
Why don't we haven't got to the zone change
Yeah, we
yet.
haven't got to that part yet.
Oh.
It'll
So
become
we'll get to that next. That'll be the next one.
Okay.
It's a little confusing, but we're trying to split it up so the planning commission can ask questions and fully understand what.
Okay, so it's in little particles. Okay.
It's in the next one.
Oh,
next-
all right,
next
thank you.
group.
Sorry.
All right, thank you. Should we have the second staff report then?
Yes. All right. What we're going to do next is I'm going to be covering the general plan amendment and the zone change, or at least the rest of the general plan amendment. We've covered one aspect of the general plan amendment, which is the update. Now we're going to cover the rest of it as well as the zone change. The general plan amendment number 0802 includes 3 modifications to the general plan. One, the housing element update, which Alexa just covered. And if approved by the City Council, then the proposed housing element will replace the existing housing element. So that one will be thrown out, and the new one will become the housing element of the general plan. Number 2 is revisions to the land use element. And number 3 is revisions to the general plan map, both of which I'm going to cover in this report. Lastly, I'm going to be covering zone change number 1202, which is what Irene was just asking about. The draft revisions to the land use element of the general plan are found in attachment 2, Exhibit C, which is a little bit difficult to find, but it comes after that lengthy housing element update. It is fairly lengthy itself, although not nearly as long. It's about 12 pages, I think. And we've tried to set it up like we would a code amendment so that you can see what areas have been deleted and what areas have been added. The land use element is the element of the general plan that provides information on how land will be utilized or how land should be utilized in the future, and it sets up land use designations from which we obtain the zoning. So that's the process whereby we define zoning, is we assign a land use designation. We create a land use designation in the land use element, and then that becomes on the general plan map, and then we create zoning from that. So,
Jeff, excuse me, is that Exhibit C in here?
yes, Exhibit C, it says land use element right after that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so the changes basically are, 1, the provision of an outline numbering system. We didn't have that in the one. Keep in mind that this general plan was adopted in 1985, so we do things a little bit differently than we did in 85. So we put an outline numbering system for ease of access and following through the element. Number 2, we've combined the goals into lists. You can see that on page 2 there. There's lists where they used to be spread throughout the element. Now we've combined them into lists so that you can see all the goals on one page. Number 3, we've deleted the mixed-use development designation. That designation was just created last year when the WIC site was approved. So it's a very new one we just created, but we're suggesting that be deleted, and next we'll be adding or creating the Central Business District / mixed-use development designation that would be in a larger area than the mixed-use designation. Really, the mixed-use designation is only one area right now, and this would be over the whole Central Business District. Lastly, there's other associated changes to maintain consistency with the Central Business District allowing residential uses. So we also have a proposed change to the general plan land use designation map, which you see before you, the change that's recommended. We want to change the area that's currently defined as a Central Business District. It is defined in the land use element of the general plan now. We're suggesting that be changed to, or create a land use designation there. It's called Central Business District Mixed Use Designation. And this CBD area would cover the area that you see there before you. And those areas currently have several designations, including regional commercial, service and neighborhood commercial, offices, public facilities, and mixed use development. So all those would be taken out and would be replaced with this Central Business District Mixed Use Designation. Lastly, we have zone change 12-02, which would change the zoning to be consistent with the general plan map. The zone change would place the mixed-use overlay zone onto the current designations that are in the Central Business District. In evaluating the current zoning in the area, staff determined that it might be a good idea to exclude the WIC site. You'll see there's a couple sites excluded there. The WIC site, which is this site here, and the Civic Center, which is this site here. So they have been excluded. The WIC site, first of all, because we have a development that was approved with its own specific zoning, a specific plan. So they tailored that specific plan to that site, and we thought it wouldn't probably be in the best interest of the development of the city to try to change their zoning in the middle of their development process. And they have submitted a plan check too, so they are in the middle of their development process. So that's the reason we left that out. If it gets built, it might be in the best interest of the city to go ahead and change it at that point in time, but right now we think it should be left out. And the Civic Center, we don't see that as a good candidate for residential development at all anyway, so it was our thought to leave that out as well. That concludes the presentation on the general plan amendment and zone change. There are some corrections we need to make that we noted, or the city attorney noted in the resolution for the zone change. We cited the wrong number. It's supposed to be 1202. There's some citations for 1201. We'll repair that before we finalize that. So that concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions this time? Must have done a good job.
We'll
Yes.
we'll let her.
Let Irene Fleck come up and ask a question again.
All right, my concern is, well, the change of zone to mixed use require housing in that zone.
We give her the answer. That was all she wanted. That's very
We
easy.
should see if there's anybody else who wants to speak before
Yeah, we will. Anybody else like to speak from the audience? All right. Okay, come on down, sir. State your name.
My name is Mario Del Fonte.
Wait a minute, Mario. Wait till you get there. We got to hear you. We're on TV.
Mario Del Fonte. Been a resident of West Covina for 40-some odd years, in business about the same amount of time. My question is simple. Has any money been allocated yet for this project, specifically the Wicks project, and from the redevelopment agency? Has any money been allocated from the redevelopment agency
For the Works project?
for the
The
Wicks
Wicks.
project? Yes. And how much, if we know how much it was?
Not pretty sure. Do you know the answer to that, Jeff?
Yeah.
Go ahead and tell him.
Why don't you see if there's any other? I'd rather answer after everyone has had a chance to speak.
Oh, okay, fine. Okay, we'll give you your answer. Mario, thank you. Yeah. Anyone else wishing to ask the question this time? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public testimony.
Well, the first question regarding will the mixed-use overlay require residential, and Fabiola is going to be presenting the code amendment itself, but we won't delay this response any longer. The mixed-use overlay is an overlay onto the existing commercial zoning. So if you, this map, oh, she already took it off, but the map that you saw with the zoning isn't going to be a residential zone. It's going to continue to be regional commercial and service and neighborhood commercial, and all whatever was under there. So whatever uses are currently allowed are going to continue to be allowed. All it does is add the ability to propose a mixed use or a residential project in those areas. So it doesn't require residential, it allows residential. So hopefully that clears that up. The second question about money allocated for the project, well, let me first make it clear. You're not talking about a project. You're talking about a plan, the general plan and the zoning. That's not a project. That's just what we review projects based upon. So there's no project before the commission tonight. Wicks was approved in October of 2011. It was not a redevelopment project. I don't believe they got any money from redevelopment, but it already has been approved. And they're already have started, the private company that owns the property has already started preparing plans to construct it. So hopefully that answers both of those questions.
I believe it does. Any other questions on this part of the segment of the presentation? Yes, he did. He did. Mm-hmm. All right, then we'll go ahead and go to the third
Over to Fabiola.
part.
Good evening, Chairman and members of the Planning Commission. The last portion will be the code amendment. As Alexa and Jeff kind of touched on, is that state law requires for cities to plan for emergency shelter. It is a requirement of Senate Bill 2, which Alexa indicated it had come into effect in January of 2008. So cities must plan for emergency shelters. Each jurisdiction must identify in its housing element at least one zoning category in which homeless shelters are allowed without a discretionary review, meaning without a conditional use permit. In this case, we have decided that the best place for emergency shelters within the city of West Covina is in the M1 zone, which is the manufacturing zone. Some of the standards that are included in the code amendment would allow for a capacity of 30 occupants. It's on a first come, first served basis. Clients must be admitted between 6 p.m. and 8 a.m. And the clients must vacate the facility by 8 a.m. And they are not guaranteed a bed the night, the following night. So they have to be readmitted. They have to be a distance of 300 feet, must be maintained from any other emergency shelter, actually 300 feet from any other emergency shelters. Requires one staff member per 15 beds. They have to provide a waiting area that is not publicly visual, not visual from public view. And the facility must provide the essential basic needs such as one toilet for every 8 beds per gender, a minimum of 1 shower for every 8 beds per gender again, and or private shower and toilet facility for each area designated for the use by individual families. It also requires an operational plan. The operational plan requires that they address security and safety for the clients that they're going to be serving. Also, that provides appropriate staffing levels, that they maintain the outdoor areas of the facility. Those are things that are included and are required by the operational plan that must be approved and reviewed by the planning director as well as the police chief. Second code amendment is efficiency unit, again required by Senate Bill 2. Cities are required to allow efficiency units or single SRO, single room occupancy units within a multifamily residential zone. The city of West Covina will allow them within the multifamily residential zone MF 45, which is 45 units per acre. Some of the standards that will be required is that each unit is a minimum size of 150 square feet and a maximum unit size of 400 square feet. Maximum occupancy of 2 persons per unit. Must provide on-site laundry facilities for tenants, cleaning supply room on each floor, and each unit must provide a bathroom, kitchen, closet. All the units must comply with the requirements of the California Building Code. An efficiency unit must not be located within 300 feet of other efficiency unit projects, emergency shelter, or other similar program. Projects that have more than 10 units must provide on-site management, and tenants must reside a minimum of 30 days in an efficiency unit. So this is not like the emergency shelters. The required parking is 1 uncovered parking space for every 3 units, 2 uncovered parking spaces for on-site manager unit, and 1 lockable bicycle parking. That's supposed to be space per unit, sorry. Last code amendment is the mixed-use overlay. The mixed-use overlay will encourage a diversity of housing types within the central business district. As indicated before by Jeff, it's where, in Alexa, is where you can basically direct growth, guide growth, and there's already transportation and other amenities that will be compatible with mixed-use setting. New housing should accommodate a broad range of age and income needs. It also will allow for the creation of pedestrian-oriented environments and support social interaction by allowing residents to work or shop within walking distance to where they live. Development focus on strong nodes of activity and would allow for growth to occur in the areas where land use and transportation connection exist, which protects the existing residential neighborhoods within the city. The density allowed in the mixed-use overlay is a minimum of 30 units. As Alexa explained, that's the default density unit that each CD would accept as being affordable. And a maximum density allowed is 75 units per acre, which is what was approved at the former Wicks furniture site. The mixed-use overlay also caps the number of total units that will be allowed to be built, and that will be 1,700 units. Some of the development standards, obviously, the city is built out. Even that we have identified 8 opportunity sites within the central business district. Some of those lots are not necessarily large enough to accommodate a mixed-use development. So there might have to be some lot consolidation in order to do something to construct and develop a site with a mixed-use project. Therefore, the minimum site that is required is 1.5 acre, maximum lot coverage of 70%. One of the things that we have to take into account is the proximity to residential uses if there's any site that is adjacent to a residential use. So in order to protect those uses, we are requiring that there be a 25-foot separation when a single-story development is proposed adjacent to a single-family zone or a single-family use. 40 feet when a 40-foot separation when a development for more than a single-story development is proposed, again adjacent to a single-family zone or single-family use. Maximum building height will be 75 feet or 5 stories, similar to the Wicks project. There will be require 50 square feet per unit of private open space and 140 square feet per unit of common open space. And the off-street parking requirements will be 1.5 parking space per studio and 1 bedroom unit, 2 parking spaces per unit with 2 or more bedrooms, and 1 parking space for every 4 dwelling units. The code amendment also includes some design guidelines. Obviously, it's not just allowing and accommodating additional units, but you also want to create a place that is walkable, that is going to be, again, a node of activity. There's going to have a sense of place. You just don't want to just provide the units. You want to provide something that is well-designed and that it works well. So there are some design guidelines included in the code amendment, and that will take a look into designing that something that provides for internal compatibility between the residential and non-residential uses on the site. Buildings should be oriented towards streets, pedestrian pathways, and active spaces. All visible frontages shall be detailed with architectural elements. Primary building entries must be should have a strong architectural definition. Building facade shall have elements that relate to the scale of a person. You don't want to have something that when you walk in that area, you feel lost. You want something that feels comfortable to a human scale. Entrances to residential, office, or upper stories uses shall be clearly defined in form and location from retail entrances. And roof designs must contribute to the overall building design. Windows on the upper floor should be smaller in size than the storefront windows on the first floor. You really want to define those retail spaces on the ground floor. Windows should maintain consistency in shape and location across the facade. And these are just some of the design guidelines. There are so many design guidelines that if you want to, I hope you had the opportunity to actually take a look into the code amendment. There's other requirements, where you place the trash enclosures and loading docks and all of that. But these are just some of the design guidelines. This concludes my presentation, and if anyone has a question, I'll be more than happy to answer.
Any commission questions? Commissioner Holtz.
Yeah, Fabio, on the emergency shelters,
Yes.
I noticed that you had on there the hours are 6 p.m. to 8 a.m. in the morning, and I volunteered and I've worked at some of these shelters. And then you've got on, but they got to vacate by 8 a.m. in the morning. And we did have a lot of people that would come in real early in the morning wanting to take a shower and types of things. So I walk in there at 7:59. You're going to make me leave at 8 a.m.?
Well,
Seems like a little, maybe the hours need to be changed a little bit?
And if the commission does feel that that should be adjusted, that's why we bring in the code amendment in front of the planning commission for consideration and input. And if you don't feel that that's adequate, definitely we can change those hours.
Yeah, because some of the people really get pretty intense. I mean, they really do, and they expect when they walk in that they can do certain things, and you got to tell them, I'm sorry, we're closing in a couple of minutes, so you turn them away.
One of the purposes for the timeline, and we're not necessarily stuck on those times, but is that they're not supposed to be a place where somebody lives. So they're
No, I
not supposed to be
realize that.
spending their 24 hours a day there for, 7 days a week, 24 hours. So we would be open to any time changes, but that's the whole goal we're trying to achieve.
But most of these people are homeless, and they come wandering in. Maybe a suggestion would be that it's 6 p.m. to 7 a.m., and at least it gives you an hour of flexibility in there. Because these people know where these places are, and they put it on their schedule, and I guarantee you they know exactly where they are, what times they have to be there, what's being served for food and everything else. And they just make the rounds of these places. So it's a small issue, but it would just change it 1 hour back.
So you're suggesting that it go from 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. with the vacation by 8 a.m.?
No, 6
No.
p.m. to 7 a.m. and vacate by 8 a.m.
Okay.
In other words, it just gives you an hour of flexibility in
Yeah.
there.
I think that's fine.
Okay, and the second item, if I may, Fabiola, you said that you've gotten some telephone calls on the proposed zone changes. Can you share with us what the concerns were of the people?
Yeah, basically, I got a phone call from the property owner of the bank, I think it's Bank West, and they also own the property Elephant Bar, where Elephant Bar is located at. They just wanted clarification of what the letter, exactly what it meant. Once I explained that all the uses that are existing on the ground will continue to exist, that they're not becoming non-conforming. There's no non-conforming uses that are being created as a result of this zone change. And also that it adds actually flexibility to the property, because they can actually in the future, if they choose to develop with a mixed-use project, that they will be allowed to do that. And they were fine with that. Obviously, they wouldn't get anything in writing, and they're not here tonight, so I don't think they have any concerns. I did also get a couple of phone calls from people that they live on Sawyer. We actually, unfortunately, when we use GIS, because the Central Business District is such a large area, that when we did the labels, by mistake, we actually included that little street, Sawyer, which is behind, I think, Cameron. Yes, Cameron Office Park. And so I did get a couple of phone calls from residents in that area, and I responded to one gentleman and explained to him that actually that was a mistake, that he should have not even gotten the letter, that his property was not being rezoned, that it was only meant for the office complex on Cameron. Then he was fine with that too. So, and then the lady who's here tonight, she also, Rose, correct? She also gave me, she also called. I wasn't able to get a hold of her. I left her a message explaining her what the overlay zone will do. So if she has any concerns, she can probably ask us tonight if she has any further concern after the presentations.
So it sounds to me like it was more just a general information, not any concerns or opposing or anything.
Yeah, or just asking for more information, but yes, there wasn't any concern, and I get the feeling by the huge attendance tonight that there wasn't a great deal of concern.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions, Commissioners? I do have one, Fabiola. On the emergency shelters, it's M1 zone only, right?
Correct.
Who actually would be running an emergency shelter, and where would the funding come from?
Well, that will be whatever funding. It will be from nonprofit organizations. Maybe Alexa can chime in a little bit.
Sure. It's often, again, a nonprofit would have to approach the city and actually submit an application if they chose to develop an emergency shelter within the M1 zone. So typically, sometimes they're related to
Very good. Thank you. Yes, Commissioner
I
Rolls.
know that the church over here does these temporary where they rotate, so this wouldn't affect them. They do that on their own through whatever organization it is.
That's correct. This wouldn't affect them.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, Commissioners? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and ask the public testimony. Anybody wishing to speak? If you have a question, Irene, come on up.
I asked this question before. Obviously, we legally notified everyone that was concerned legally, but how do you tell the rest? We don't have a turnout here, partly because people don't know about this.
It was in the paper. It was published in the paper.
But was it published as an article, or is it, most people I know aren't looking at all the little fine print.
They look in the back. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I've looked at some in the Examiner when there's a picture that goes with it. I thumb through because some of those are pretty interesting. But I don't, West Covina doesn't just jump out at people. So I think very few people are aware of this. And I think the thing is that if they have a chance to find out what's going on, it's not nearly as alarming as if you just hear about it. Because the people that need to be notified, I think, are the ones that are really concerned. Not the owner of the property, it's the people who are there every day on that piece of property doing their job. But I realize that's the owner's responsibility, probably. But is there no way that you can just generally let people know what's coming up?
Well, I suppose they could write an article in the paper as opposed to putting it in the back, right, Phil?
Well, there's actually an expense. We don't normally advertise, on the Tribune. We do the legal notices. We also, what we did, which I was not mentioned tonight, we also did send courtesy letters to all the senior apartments and all the affordable units. We notified them back in 2008 of the workshop, and I believe nobody showed up that night. I did went ahead and sent again courtesy letters inviting them to participate. All the senior, all the affordable units that are preserved by the city, I send them also to housing advocacy groups. So there was a comprehensive list of organizations, and that we actually reached out and sent a letter inviting them to participate because we would like to hear from them. Well, not necessarily. Yes, but and this is their opportunity. All we can do is reach out to them, and it's up to them to participate. But I definitely encourage them to participate. And I did get a couple of phone calls from some of the organizations acknowledging that they got the letter, but they weren't going to be able to make it to the meeting, and they had no concerns. So there's only so much we can do too.
We've got to speak up at the dais here because they can't hear us on TV. You want to say anything else? Okay, that's fine. You like to speak, ma'am? Come on down.
I'm Rosa Spence.
Yes, speak
I'm
up.
Rosa Spence,
Yes.
and we live right behind the Cameron Office Park. And when the letter first came, there was definitely concern that possibly apartments are going in there with a rezoning and so on. Now, a couple of questions have been answered also that it's still considered commercial. Now, with being commercial, we have had also the challenge that they are allowed to work on the buildings from 7 in the morning till 8 at night if they want to. If they want to clean the area, they come at midnight. Like every Monday night, like last night, 10 to midnight, they came and cleaned till close to 1 o'clock because it's commercial, so they can just go do this type of thing. Now, what I'm not quite sure yet, if there are major buildings going in there also, besides the office complexes, half of them are empty at this point. It took almost 5 years to reconstruct the one that had burned down, and there's been nothing but commotion going on. And I'm just wondering if there's going to be some reconstruction in various areas, and this is still going to continue. We have lived there since '65, and when we first came, we had a view of the mountains, and of course, progress and everything else, things have changed. But, I'm just wondering how much is going to be involved in that corner, and I'm not quite sure about all the zones and so on and what it involves. I'm not sure where the Center for the Homeless is going up, which area that involves. And those things make quite a difference if we're totally informed. A map with just A or B or whatever it is doesn't make too much sense to me.
Well, as far as where you live, you probably know as good right now as we do what might happen there. This is just something we're making available, so we have to have somebody that's going to either go in and agree to build something or change it. As it stands right now, there's no change. Nothing's going to happen overnight. I know the complex you're talking about, it's a new building in the middle there, and offices all around it. I mean, that could well be there 20 years from now. We really don't know.
So it's nothing definite at this point.
We're required by the state to put this element out and follow their guidelines, and that's what we're doing.
Okay.
So that's the best we can answer your question.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the public testimony. And we'll open it up to commissioner discussion. Anybody like to start? Commissioner Holtz.
I really have nothing to add right now. I think it's a lot of work. I think we're trying to stay ahead of the train that's coming at us, and I think it's a great job that what you've done here. Like the last lady said, we don't know what's going to happen in the future. This is just a master plan to be prepared for the future. So we don't know if there even a homeless shelter is going in, where it would go in, or apartments or whatever. It's just a master plan that we have to have on the books so that we're not fined with all the things that she put up there, the legal and the fines and all that. So I think it's a great job that the staff has done, and Ms. Washburn and Fabiola. So I'm in favor of it.
Thank you, Commissioner Holtz. Commissioner Menifee, any questions on it?
I think that the questions I had have been resolved, thanks to the staff for doing that. Jeff and I talked several times also about the issue of what census tract data we're using and for what period of time, because I see our task as being that of planning, not of historians. And so I'm interested in seeing what it is we need to look at in the future that will guide us in what we do here as this commission meets and looks at individual circumstances. But I do appreciate that we have to have that background, and I'm pleased to know that we're going to be moving ahead. And I thank very much the staff for your very clear presentation tonight of this massive set of documentation we've been staring at for several weeks and trying to understand. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Woods, any comments on it? Would you like to comment?
No, I have nothing
All right.
more to say.
Well, I think everything's pretty much been said. We have, we're required, and staff has done a great job on it. And unfortunately, starting next year, we'll be doing it all over again. But but anyway, it gets us up to date on it. And personally, some of these areas, I would, my own mind, I'd like to see something happen there, because there's a lot of areas, especially I think over in Vincent Avenue, that are really underused, and they would be nice to have something different, but it remains to be seen what's going to happen. And all we can do is, make ready for it and make it easy for them to do it, but they still have to come and do it before we can even get it done. So with that, I think I'll go ahead and call for the resolution number, please.
Yes, there are 4 resolutions. The first one will be 12-5483, which is the mitigated negative declaration of environmental impact. The second one is 12-5484, which is a general plan amendment. The next one is 12-5485, 12-5485, which is the code amendment. And lastly is 12-5486, which is a zone change.
All right. One motion be okay for the whole thing?
Yes.
Okay. Do we have a motion, please?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Commissioner Menifee. And roll call, please.
Commissioner Holtz.
Aye.
Commissioner Woods.
Aye.
Commissioner Menifee.
Aye.
Chairman Stewart.
Aye. 4-0, it passes. We now have a new set of plans in place here.
Well, these are recommendations that will go to the Planning Commission. All these items are required to be approved by the City Council. So that is scheduled tentatively for November 20th
Right.
to go to City Council for a hearing before them.
Very good, thank you. All right, with that, we'll go ahead and move on to non-hearing items. Our number 1 and number 4 is a study session on variances requested on 2007 through 2000.
After we researched them, we reviewed and categorized them to the best of our ability, and some of the categories are very specific and some of them are more general. So what we found, and I put them in numerical order, pylon signs, we found there were 15, and these are submitted, not necessarily all these were approved, but all this is submitted. Single-family development standards, there were 14. Parking standards, there were 11. Commercial development standards, there were 7. Wireless communication standards, there were 7. Wall signs, there were 4. And multiple family development standards, there were 2. In addition, there was 1 variance each for reader board signs, service station standards, subdivision standards, and billiard parlor standards. I think it is valuable to periodically evaluate the number and types of variants that are being requested, because it is a question if variants are being approved, perhaps it's time to look at the code that the variants are being requested for, because maybe you should change the code. So I think that is a valuable thing for the Planning Commission staff to consider. If the Planning Commission would like more detailed information on types, categories, requested variants, we can certainly look into that and provide that at an upcoming meeting. In just looking at the categories, our suggestion, if you wish to go forward with something like that, is to maybe take a few and not try to do every type of variance application or category. Is maybe take the top 3, which would be the pylon sign, single-family development standards, and parking standards. Take a look at what those are for, and then get some education on that before we choose to do anything else. So that would be staff's presentation. Happy to have any discussion at all.
Well, Commissioner Menifee brought that up, so are you satisfied with what we got? Do you want to go further?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think I would like to see us extend our discussions to include commercial development standards and the wireless communication standards. I know we have several wireless communication things on future agendas that are laying there in wait.
Yes.
And so I think it would be good for us to understand that perspective, so that when we get the individual things, we can put them in an orderly manner. So I'd like to extend that list that you've proposed to include those, so we'd have the 5 items, please.
All right, any Commissioner comments? Commissioner Holtz.
I appreciate this coming back. I was surprised. I thought there had been more variances. It's just my feeling. I thought there had been more. The only one that I'm concerned about, and I'd like to have staff look at, is the pylon signs. I know there's 15 in 5 years, but most of those were, quite larger than what was allowed. And we just had one out at Eastland again, and we had one at McDonald's that was 85 feet high. So the rest of them, I really don't have a problem with. It doesn't seem like there's that many over a 5-year period. But the pylon signs, I think we ought to look at. It seems like every time one of those comes up, we make a variance on it. And so if that's what we're going to do, and that's the norm, then I think we ought to look at what the standard should be.
Good, thank you. Any other comments? My only comment is I'm surprised we had 15 pylon signs, because I think I've been here for everything on this list here. But if we want to take it further, and are we talking about maybe changing something, or just going further with what?
Well, I think the next step would be to provide more detailed information on what the issues were, and then the next step after that might be to determine if we think the code should be looked at.
Yeah.
I think it's a little early now. We just did a kind of a rough statistics on the number.
Right.
And some of these, like the single-family standards, there's 14 of them, but they might be from 8 different standards. It's not just one standard. Whereas the pylon sign is probably 1 or 2 standards. All of them are either one, or it's the height or square footage. That's basically, they're always, so it's always the same thing. So that's sort of how I see it. This isn't going to be a quick thing. It's more of a study, so the Planning Commission has an idea of what the Planning Commission and perhaps City Council have been approving over the past few years, to get an idea of where the Planning Commission might think it's a good idea to go from here.
All right. Well, I don't think there's any rush to bring it back to us. If you had time to, to do it actually and bring us something back, that'd be fine. I could do without it really, but if the Commission wants to do it, that's fine. Yeah, Commissioner Holtz.
Yeah, on the pylon signs, what I'd like to see of those 15, what is the standard? And then of those 15s that we made variances, how much larger? Because there's never anything smaller. It's always larger. And I think some of them that we had were almost twice what the code allowed. So if we could look at those 15, say what is the standard, and then what were those 15 that were approved? And I think that would give us an idea that we might have to just increase what it is. I'm not necessarily against it. I'm just saying every time it comes up, if we're going to do a variance, it doesn't make sense to me. Okay? That's my feeling. So if we could do that, I think it would help us at one of the future meetings.
Okay.
All right. So let's pin it down on which ones we're going to do, then we're going to motion to do it, right?
I would prefer that, yeah.
Yeah.
And before you go that, you might want to choose the ones you'd like to do and then put them in priority order. Because it's probably best if I don't give them all to you at once, because it might be easier just to take one at a time. That way you get a better feeling for what the issue is.
Right.
So
Number 1 is pylon signs. That would be my choice, period, on the whole thing. So everybody else is, whatever you like to speak up. Commissioner Holtz?
Yeah, I'm in favor of that. Number 1 would be pylon signs, and really that's the only one I personally have a problem with.
Well, I brought up this issue because if we have a code that we're supposed to live by, but we have to keep making variances to that code, it begs the question, is the code still appropriate? And I think when you see the number that are shown here of variances that have taken staff's time and our time and the community's time and cost, that we should be looking and saying, obviously I agree. Pylons is the number 1. It's had the most variances. But at the same time, the other issues probably should be looked at too. I would say let's start with the pylons, and and I would move that, and let the staff come to us over a period of time, not to be set by us, when they have the chance to push things together in their busy schedules, and let's deal with these one at a time, and let's take, if we may, those down through the wireless communication standards, which there have been 7 of.
And I think I can follow that. I guess to keep, as you guys have all referenced, we're not talking about some are going to get done in a month. If the Planning Commission determines that they'd like to change the code, we've got to come back with a resolution to initiate, then we've got to study, we've got to come back to a study session. All that usually takes, so this may be a blueprint for several years' worth of work to update the code. And I think that's probably a wise way to do it, rather than just doing everything at once and then missing something or doing a knee-jerk reaction. So we'll start with that, with the pylon sign, and we'll bring it back, probably not in the too distant, before the end of the year. We've got 3 meetings left before the end of the year, so I think we can bring that one back. And then we can also start maybe analyzing the next 1 or 2 after that to bring those back.
That'd be fine.
That's probably a good.
Commissioner Menifee, did you make a motion for the pylon sign? Oh, Commissioner Holtz.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you, Commissioner, but I'm looking at over a 5-year period. Staff has got plenty of work to do, and they've been cut back a lot. But to look at 2 variances in multiple family development standards and 4 on wall signs, to me is just, I don't know that we need to do that. I agree with, it's not necessarily the number, although 15, because they're the highest, but a pylon sign seems to jump out at me. But, parking standards, 11, that's not that much over a 5-year period. And I just don't want to belay staff with more work than they need. So I think we need to kind of prioritize the ones we want and not do the whole laundry list.
Right, we have a motion on the floor for the pylon signs only. Do we have a second?
Well, I made the motion, so I
Oh, you
can't second.
made the motion?
Yeah.
Oh, he did too. Okay, so you second, Commissioner Menifee?
No, I didn't.
You made the motion though, right?
I thought I made a motion, but it wasn't just for pylon signs.
Oh, okay. Okay, your motion was first, and I misunderstood you. I'll second Commissioner Holtz's motion. All in favor of that? Aye?
Aye.
Don, we had 3 to 1? 3 to 1. Okay. So we'll start with pylon signs, staff
Start with
report.
pylon signs. I don't think we can have, once we get past the pylon sign discussion, we can go back to this and look and see if we want to talk about more.
That'd be fine. All right, we'll move on to another study session, which is the wireless telecommunications facilities. The study session is to review wireless telecommunications facility standards in the municipal code. Would staff like to comment on that, please?
Yes, I will cover that, and it kind of goes into our earlier conversation about wireless. I didn't jot down, but we did just, and I'm not sure how much affected those 7 variances, but we did just change, we just went through a review of the wireless code, 2 years ago? I can't, you guys were both on, weren't you, when we did that?
Yeah.
So it hasn't been too long ago, so some of those variances that were adopted may have been, wouldn't have happened if we had the code that we have now. But anyway, let me go through this. This is basically a discussion, a background on the wireless code, what it's meant to do, how it came into being, purpose of it. So the wireless telecommunications facility code standards were originally adopted in 1997 in response to the proliferation of antenna installations to support cell phone usage. So that's when cell phones started, just exploding, and so people were putting those towers in. The first towers that were put in were single support towers with arrays mounted on the top, basically a telephone pole with an array on the top. We do have a few of those basically right in this area. There's the only ones I know of in town. There's 2 or 3 of them on the other side of the freeway. Some feeling that those may be not the most attractive looking things in the world, so that's part of the reason that they adopted the code that we have now, or started going through the code that we have now. Most wireless facilities are freestanding wireless facilities, or building mounted, or are roof mounted. Freestanding wireless facilities generate the most attention as they add the additional structure to the landscape, while building and roof mounted antennas don't generate as much issue. People don't even notice them. The type of facility determines the review process for the approval. So freestanding wireless facilities requires conditional use permit. It has to come for a public hearing before the Planning Commission. Freestanding wireless facilities come in a variety of forms, and basically as many forms as creativity can allow. In the city of West Covina, we have some that are camouflaged to various degrees of success as pine trees or monopines, palm trees or monopalms, cypress trees, church towers, flagpoles, as well as the couple standard monopoles we have. Other cities in the vicinity have facilities that include windmills and water towers, clock towers, and monolith towers. The city has pursued a requirement that all freestanding wireless towers should be stealth to eliminate, reduce the visual aesthetic impact. So we require them to do something besides, we don't allow monopoles now, we require them to try to do something. And again, as I think all of you are aware, sometimes they're successful, sometimes they're not very successful at covering themselves. Building and roof-mounted antenna facilities require the approval of an administrative use permit, which is reviewed by staff. It doesn't come to the Planning Commission. Building-mounted antennas are generally panel antennas that are mounted on the building wall. And you see them around sometimes. If you look really close, or if you notice, you might notice them at the Lake's office buildings. They have some of those. Roof-mounted antennas are mounted on the flat roofs of multi-story buildings, and most of the multi-story buildings in town have those. Sometimes you can see antenna structures because there's not much of a parapet wall or a screen wall. Other times you don't notice them at all. Revisions to existing wireless facilities require the approval of a planning director's modification. Just to go through that litany of things, the CUP requires a hearing before the Planning Commission, requires public notification. And an AUP requires review by staff and requires public notification. A planning director's modification does not require notification at all, but it does require review by staff. These type of modifications include co-locations on existing monopines or other freestanding wireless facilities, modifications to the number of antennas mounted on an array on a freestanding facility, revisions to the size of antennas, and any other modifications to an approved wireless facilities. And just by way of definition, co-locations mean a separate set of arrays added to an existing freestanding wireless structure. Right now, that's the most common type of application we're receiving for wireless facilities is these planning director's modifications, because a lot of people are upgrading their antennas to be able to facilitate more data transfer. So they're not changing the structures, and a lot of times they're not even changing the framework that the antennas are mounted on, but they are changing the shape or the number of antennas that are up there. The municipal code includes development standards that wireless facilities must comply with. No freestanding wireless facilities can be located in a required front, side, or rear yard. Freestanding wireless facilities must be a minimum of 100 feet from any residences or residentially zoned properties, and they're not allowed in residential zones. Freestanding facilities are not allowed to be more than 60 feet in height, nor are they allowed to exceed 20 feet above the peak of the roof. That last one, I wasn't even aware that was in the code. We've never had an issue with that. Most of them that are on the roof are no more than 6 feet above the roof. The municipal code does include design standards that fit into 4 categories. One is all facilities, another is building and roof-mounted antennas, another is freestanding facilities, and the last is revisions or co-location to existing freestanding facilities. And I provided you some information on some of those standards. We have standards for building and roof-mounted antennas. Again, those you don't notice as much. The public isn't usually aware that they're even there. We also have standards for freestanding facilities, and I'll go through those because those are the ones that people are most knowledgeable on. Minimum 1/2 mile separation between facilities, and just so, just one little caveat on that. The Planning Commission at the time when we were working on the code amendment had noted that we were approving some variances, a number of variances, allowing a less than 1/2 mile separation between facilities. So that was one of the reasons for they initiated the code amendment to begin with. And I believe that the Planning Commission, when they went through and reviewed it, determined that they thought a 1/3 mile might be a better standard than a 1/2 mile. It might reduce the number of variances. But the council, they have the authority, the final authority to review. When it went to council, they didn't agree with that. They thought it should still stay at a 1/2 mile. So it stayed at a 1/2 mile. That's sort of an example of something that can happen. There's a difference of opinion between what the Planning Commission thinks and what the council thinks. So the code still does require a 1/2 mile separation between freestanding facilities. All freestanding facilities are required to be stealth, to be designed to look like something else. Freestanding facilities designed as trees are to bear a realistic appearance. And then lastly, accessory support facilities on city-owned sites, which means the cabinets and such that are usually located on the ground. On city-owned sites, are required to be located in an underground vault unless specifically approved by the hearing body. We say hearing body either by the Planning Commission or City Council if it were to get appealed. We also have standards for revisions or co-locations. So antennas shall have sock covers. What that is a kind of a mesh covering that's green and has kind of a leafy or needly structure to it to help screen the antennas to the best of ability. Second, no portion of the antenna array may extend beyond the branch line. And you may notice some that are out there that do that, that are extending. And we've sort of learned by mistakes and seeing things happen. And we're watching that very closely now that the branch line need to be extending further than the arrays. Landscaping may be required to be upgraded to screen the equipment of the enclosure. And lastly, all electrical wires, losing my voice here, all electrical wires shall be in conduits and shall be located underground or affixed to the ground so that they don't look like bridges and things that are floating through the air. The wireless telecommunication facility section of the code does allow a 20% deviation from height and minimum separation standards. That's the only things. So it's not a variance. It's allowed through the CUP process. There's a couple of findings that the Planning Commission has to make to do that. So there is an ability to allow a 20% higher height, and we have lots of those in town. There was a time period when the Planning Commission was more than happy to approve those, and that allows up to about 72 feet in height. And a 20% reduction in the separation of a half mile, too, is also allowed. We have some of those, but most of the time when we had a separation issue, that wasn't enough to achieve what they wanted. In conclusion, the intent of the Wireless Telecommunications Facility Ordinance is to allow the placement of wireless antennas in a manner that does not create a negative aesthetic condition. The review of the facilities, therefore, is for design considerations. That's why it's before the Planning Commission. Issues with health risks associated with RF radiation are prohibited from being reviewed by federal legislation. That's not allowed to be something that the Planning Commission consider or especially deny something based on. And as with other types of applications, appeals are available to applicants or concerned citizens. The appeal would go to any decision by the Planning Commission could be appealed to the City Council. So that includes my presentation on the wireless facilities.
Any questions, staff?
Yes.
Commissioner Menifee.
I've heard this before, but I just don't get it. The statement that issues of health risks associated with RF radiation are prohibited from being reviewed.
Yeah, Commissioner, if I may. Under federal law, there is preemption of local regulations that attempt to impose environmental regulations with respect to these communication facilities. And so basically what a federal law says is that if the applicant is proposing using frequencies that are consistent with what federal guidelines require for these types of facilities, then the cities cannot regulate and require, lower frequencies as long as they're complying with what federal regulations are already establishing. So one of the things that staff usually does is make sure that the frequencies that they are claiming they are using is consistent with what the federal laws require for that type of equipment. So provided that they are consistent, then the Planning Commission and staff cannot require that they use a different type of frequency if it's not required by federal law. And that's the only element that's preempted from your jurisdiction, is whether they are complying using the right frequency. Because there is some concerns from the general public about the safety issues with respect to these kind of microwaves or frequencies. So the federal legislation realized that this is an issue that is a national concern, and in order to keep consistency and allow some kind of predictability for these types of companies, they've established certain federal guidelines that everyone tries to comply with, rather than local guidelines that would be different from every single city and create quite a havoc for the communication industry.
I think I understood that to say we couldn't change the frequency at which they operate.
Correct. Or we couldn't require them to operate at a different frequency.
Right.
For whatever reason that we may come up with.
So if we want not to have that antenna in that location, it has to be for a reason other than the frequency at which they're operating.
Correct.
All right. Thank you.
Any other questions, staff? Commissioner Holtz?
Yeah, not a question. I spend quite a bit of time in this industry, and I will tell you that with the new scientific discoveries they have, they want to go to satellite. I mean, that's the eventual plan, to go to satellite. So I don't know in what time frame. It's all an economic type of thing, but you will probably see less and less of these towers going up. And additionally, they do have now today they're just small boxes, don't ask me what's inside of them, that replace a lot of the wires or metal things sticking out and all on the poles. So they're progressing towards towards satellite, but in the meantime, they are progressing towards less unsightly things, if you will, on the poles. And so it's just a matter of time, but again, it's an economic thing. In the years past, the telephone company has all the copper wire up, and there was just one heck of an investment in that. And when they started to go to wireless, they still have to maintain that copper wire. So it's an economic situation right now. But I think we'll see less and less in the future requests for these poles going up. And it seems to me we haven't seen that many lately at all. They're using the existing poles and putting these new digital type conveniences on it to increase their capability of what's there right now. So just information only.
Yeah.
My only comment on that, I agree. I believe Commissioner Holtz, what I see is what he's saying. I agree with that. The only caveat onto that is, a couple years ago, there was a new provider that entered into the fray, and we did get some applications at that time. We got a little bevy of applications that came in. That could still happen, but I foresee that we're not going to get too many more freestanding or freestanding wireless applications.
And I think a lot of the companies are sharing now, sharing the poles, because they find it's more economical rather than put their own pole in. If they pay rent or lease an existing pole, it's up from another company. So
I think we have a few that have been approved that haven't been built yet.
Yes.
But we've had very few in the last year and a half or so that come in for a new one. One question I have, if you have a co-locator and their equipment doesn't go inside the branch line, can you just make them put more branches up? Is that simple as that? Is that what it would be to cover it?
They could do, that would be one method that they could comply with our code, yes.
Yeah.
I don't think they'd like to do that because I'm not sure if their original footing and design of their pole allows for additional branches to be put in additional wind load.
Well,
But that would be one option.
Like the palm tree at Hollenbeck and the freeway. I mean, obviously, the second carrier down, if there's not one there now, will be, and there's no branches there. So they have to figure somehow to cover it up. Right?
Palm trees aren't ideal,
No.
but yeah. we learned that one too.
Yeah, even live ones. Correct. Any other comments for staff? That's a very good report. Thank you very much. All right, we'll get back here to the right page here. No, we don't need an approval for that. That was just a study session only. That's right. Okay, but we will go on to now to continuation of oral communications. Last opportunity for anybody in the audience has anything to say. Irene Fleck from the library.
This is just to say thank you for your availability. The planning department is my favorite department, and I do thank you guys. It's really nice to be able to feel that we can say something and you do care. I thank you very much.
You're certainly welcome. I enjoy your little tidbits from the library when you bring them at City Council. All right, we'll go on to commissioner reports. I do have one item tonight. If, as you may know or not know, we do have a design review committee that meets before this planning commission meeting. We meet about 6:30 or so. There's two of us on that committee, and currently it's Commissioner Holtz and myself. And Commissioner Valles was our alternate, and he has resigned. So I've talked to Commissioner Woods. He's agreed to be our alternate, just in case one of us can't make it. So for the record, we'll put his name down as our alternate. And with that, anybody else have any reports or anything that we'd like to? Commissioner?
I have a question, Jeff, if you can fill us in at all on the vacancy that we have on the commission and where that process is.
Well, what I do know is that, well, I believe that we had Lloyd was here last time and checked his phone, that he was correct what was on there, but it was incorrect on the website. So it is still open even as today. I talked to the city clerk about it today. What I don't know, I don't recall is exactly when it closes. I think somewhere near the end of the month. So it's open for another week or so, I think. And then they'll take that, and then they've got to take it to council, and then council's got to schedule a time. So I still think we're probably looking at December before someone's appointed, but that's kind of a guess. It's kind of a guess.
Thank you. I do have one question. On the Chase Bank building over at Eastland, they got it graded and paid so fast, and it's just sitting there right now. Do you know anything about that? Is it?
Well, what I understand is that Westfield had some obligation to do some of the work, and then Chase is going to do the rest of it.
Okay.
So Westfield, not being the property owner anymore, was interested in getting their part done. I believe that's why.
Westfield's been in there and done there. Now they got to wait for Chase to do that.
I believe that's what it is, yes.
Very good. Thank you. Commissioner Holtz?
Do you have any idea or any information on when Kohl's is going to be finished? Oh, Kohl's? Walmart, I'm sorry. Sorry.
I didn't know they'd
Walmart,
started.
yeah, I was going to say, surprise. I mean, they've been working on there feverishly for months.
Walmart is, I should have the date, but I don't have the date in mind. They are furiously trying to get open before Thanksgiving.
Oh, really? Okay.
That's their goal.
And what about the furniture store next door?
I'm not sure with Ashley Furniture. It's Ashley Furniture, but I don't know. I haven't heard when they're.
They've announced a date, but I forget what it is. It may be maybe November 10th or something like that.
I have a feeling it's going to be within the next
Yeah,
month as
yeah,
well.
it was in the paper. They did announce. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. We'll go ahead and go in the planning director's report.
The only thing under the planning director's report is the monthly status, which would provide you information on the projects that are currently in the pipeline that have been approved by the planning commission.
Right. And next thing will be up the city council action.
Nothing to report on city council action.
Nothing to report city council action. All right. Anything else anybody wants to bring up before we adjourn? Okay, I'll entertain a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, all in favor? Aye. We adjourned at, what is it, 8:38?